this tends to be something I start with a lot, is I make drones in the key of the song that I'm working in.
This episode is sponsored by Aux, the desktop app that helps you collaborate on music projects with anyone, anywhere in the world. Stick around to the end to get a special offer of 50 gigs of storage for just $1.
And basically, I record a long pass of overlapping notes, and then I put that into some software called Pool Stretch. I'll show you the process. So this is one of them.
And is this a keyboard, or you say you start the drone from a?
Yeah. So this would have been. I can play you. So this sound runs over the build-up section of Fine Day, and I made it from a square wave patch in Serum running through Valhalla Shimmer, and the original sounds like this. I basically then put this into Pool Stretch, which is it's like a sort of extreme time stretch software that looks like it was designed in Windows 95. It's very old looking.
Is it old itself?
It's actually, oh my God, it doesn't actually even load at the moment. So, hang on, wait, there's this version that loads. Here we go. So yeah, it's quite an old piece of software, and you basically put pieces of audio into it, and then you can decide how much to stretch it out by. And there was quite a famous thing somebody did with it a few years ago. They put like a Justin Bieber song into it, and it turned it into sort of piece of ambient music, basically.
Right.
It sort of smooths out any transients or anything like that. So it's good for, basically just has quite interesting results when you put things into it. I think the first time I did it, actually, I did it with the Roland Juno 60, which is behind you. And then I just remember putting that into Pool Stretch and getting some incredible, like, evolving sort of chords out of it. And I just, ever since then, it's been like a technique I've used early on in projects, because it's nice not basically making music in complete silence. It's quite useful to, normally the next stage of my writing process is to write a bass line.
Yeah.
Or just like figure out what the root notes of the chords should be. But it's good to have something to do that too. Otherwise, you're just kind of doing it in isolation. So I quite often have these beds, and I quite often reuse them from other songs and stuff.
Right. So was the bass line next in this?
I think probably the chords. So I was like using, I'm quite into learning about the gear that was used for different older dance music. And I was at the time really into EMU emulator sounds, and they're kind of early sampling keyboards, sort of early Rompler type things. And there's an emulation of them that I was using for this by UVI, and this is a Makato string patch,
right?
And I basically love like nostalgia in sounds. I mean, this really reminds me of like this actually really reminds me of Pet Shop Boys' West End Girls.
Right, yeah, I think
it's the same string patch.
Wow.
Yeah, so this is what I use for the main chords, and then I layered that up with a patch in Serum, I think, here, which is more of a unison saw type thing, with a bit of bit of an envelope on it. There's some sampled strings, and there's also this, which is also something through. This is a sort of old sample I had of some reverby vocals that I put into Pool Stretch as well. And yeah, and then I would have put in this bass for the breakdown, which is, I kind of quite often use a very similar patch for all my breakdown basses, which is just like a low unison saw, sometimes with a bit of high pass. I find that using a sub in a breakdown is often a bit much, and it's a bit sort of takes over the mix too much. So the basses that I use for breakdowns tend to be completely different from the basses that I'd use for drops. I think the next thing, I made this pattern, which is quite simple, but this sort of helped with the drop, which was created from another kind of old technique, which is using got a piece of software that doesn't work on M1 Max anymore, unfortunately, but it's called Akai, and it's an emulation of the old Akai time stretch, which was used in a lot of early drum and bass, and you can and jungle, and basically you can use it to create tonal melodic sounds from breakbeats. So a lot of the time people would put a breakbeat into an Akai and then change the settings so that they would create a kind of tonal breakbeat. I'll show you what it would sound like. And it's just another old technique that I wanted to try and use. So I sort of created this this patch from that.
Today's show is brought to you by our friends at Aux. Our podcast looks in depth at the creative process, but one part of the process that we don't talk about is how painful it can be to manage these creative projects. Currently, it involves numerous apps, websites, and tools for file storage, sending large projects, or providing detailed feedback. The team at Aux are here to change that. The Aux app keeps your DAW project synced up in the background, so you don't have to wait for your collaborators to upload their latest version. And what's unique is that you can leave detailed, time-stamped comments on the track and project stems, making feedback so much more precise and easy to manage. You can also relax knowing your projects are backed up too. The app is free for up to 10 gigs of project files, but there's a special offer for Take Notes listeners. 50 gigs of file storage for just $1 per month by using the code TAKENOTES, all one word, when you subscribe to the starter plan. Visit aux.app/take notes to get the full details. And now, on with the show.
There's definitely a honeymoon period when you're working on a song, and I find I'm always really careful to not record something too early in the process, because I'll just listen to whatever's my first render of something, I'll listen to death, because I'll just be really excited at that point. That'll be my peak excitement for a song. So I'm always a bit wary about doing that too soon, because you can sort of wear out the ideas in your brain too early.
Is there anything else we should hear from Fine Day before we move on?
I'm trying to think. So I think then I would have added the bass, which is quite simple. What's called a respace, and this is like a classic type of drum and bass. It's a great sound, but it's created by detuning different oscillators and low passing them. This one I've done in massive, and then I've reduced the spectrum, reduced the intensity on it, which I think basically just like takes out high harmonics. And these type of sounds are great, but they're really annoying to work with, because basically when you detune multiple oscillators, it's sort of asking for trouble, especially in the bass area. So it's something I'm always battling with and trying to get the balance right.
Right. And what kind of trouble would ensue?
Well, just that it just creates a lot of muddiness, basically, and sort of unmanaged frequencies. The sort of standard of mixing in drum and bass is very high, so I always feel like you're trying to compete with very polished mixes, or at least very loud mixes. So the challenge is just sort of managing what's going on with the low end and simplifying the very lows to just sine waves, basically, to make them super clean.
Right.
But there'll be a lot of when I'm sort of finessing a track, there's a lot of work in terms of making sure that there are no overhanging tails of stuff. So I do a lot of stuff with the speaker on and off control in Ableton. So I'd basically, if there was like a reverb tail that I didn't want to be overlapping a drop, I'd just turn off that channel completely. Obviously sometimes that's desirable, but there's a lot of management of overlapping elements so that you're just getting the maximum power from each element that's there at the time. So obviously using side chaining as well. I would sidechain the the kicks and quite often the snare, I'd use that to duck the low sub bass, so that there's a certain amount of sub in the kick, and so that's not interfering with the sub from the bass line. I did add an extra piece of vocal which I recorded with the band Lows. And I just love that ad lib so much. I did these, so basically recorded a few of the first piece of vocal that you hear, and then I chopped it up and put it through a gate, which is kind of like another old school technique that you'd use. So I've got this operator here, it's silent, but it's triggering this gate to open and shut. So without the gate on it, it would probably sound quite weird. Let's have a listen. And then, I just created that rhythm with the gate. It's fun because you can basically play the gate with a keyboard. So it's much more instant to come up with chops, because I could just be playing any sort of rhythm there. That kind of thing. But one thing with this song actually was that I had this sort of bleepy part in this section, and it was kind of like this or that, and I ended up going with the vocal, and it's one of those. I think when you start producing, you kind of cram everything in basically, and the more I've gone on, I've been much more like you kind of just want a few key elements at once, so the listener can kind of take those in.